Stats SA has withdrawn crucial data from its Census 2022. Statistician General Risenga Maluleke has, however, rejected reports that Stats SA has withdrawn the data due to inaccuracies, but says it's due to the fact that their publications are specially dedicated for those categories, which give a more accurate tally of the numbers. Among the excluded data is that of income, employment, as well as mortality. Maluleke says while the Census 2022 has attracted a great deal of criticism due to the fact that it was conducted during the COVID-19 period, the institution stands by the data. Among those who have criticized the Census 2022 is University of Cape Town Professor of Demography and Director of the Centre for Actuarial Research, Tom Moultrie, and he joins us this evening to share his views on this matter. Good afternoon, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us on The Full View. You have, of course, been among the most fiercest critics of the Census 22, having been quoted as saying the exclusion of certain data is a travesty. Just for the benefit of those who might not understand why this data exclusion story is all the talk right now, just talk us through its significance and how it affects our lives and those of businesses, even government itself, insofar as policy and budgetary decisions.
Thank you. Our principal concern is that the release or the announcement by Stats SA on Tuesday afternoon that they were not going to release data on income, employment, fertility and mortality in the country from the census adds to our concerns about the overall quality and reliability of those census data. When we published our concerns in July, we didn't know that these data were not going to be released. But the fact that they're not going to be released tells us that there are other far more substantial problems in the data than we had possibly understood. And the fact that the reasons given for the non-release of that data is because, in Stats SA's own words, that there were reporting-related biases or coverage issues in generating those data. And the employment and income data are crucial for economists. They are very different from the quarterly labour force survey, but it's a much larger sample in the census and it allows you to drill far deeper into small areas of the country to understand social dynamics better. The birth and death data is crucial for us to understand how the population of South Africa is likely to change going forward into the future years. And so together, these represent a massive gap in our ability to understand the South African population.
And one assumes that that assists in budgets as well.
So the
policy.
Provincial populations are used by the National Treasury to allocate resources to the provinces. We don't think that in aggregate the provincial totals or the share of the provincial numbers from the census are that different from that released by Stats South Africa. But when you go further down, it's the municipalities and districts where the rubber meets the road for service delivery. And we have very severe concerns about the accuracy of numbers at a municipal and a district level.
Let's talk about those, particularly because a number of experts had the biggest gripe around municipalities such as that in Johannesburg, also even in the city of Cape Town, that here, particularly with Johannesburg, the budget will somehow compromise the very residents of Johannesburg, because if there was a significant undercounting, then what does it mean when it comes time to allocate budgets?
Well, I mean, that's exactly our concern. So even if the National Treasury allocation to, say, Gauteng or to the Western Cape is broadly accurate in terms of the population numbers, when those provinces themselves allocate funds to municipalities, or when national departments of health decide to build schools or infrastructure or clinics, then we are far less certain that those resource allocations will be correct. And so far, Stats South Africa has not actually engaged with our critique, which we published. It was 20,000 words, 60 pages, which we published over a month ago. And the only response has been to say, no, it's all fine. And yet on Tuesday, they announced that more data, which we hadn't seen before then, is not going to be released.
Now, there were those who felt the survey should have been delayed because it was at the height of COVID that they went and decided to have this survey. But there's, of course, a commitment that on their part at the time that they would be able to conduct even certain parts of it online. Do you think that in hindsight, perhaps it would have been a better decision to just have delayed it?
Certainly, had we been asked, we would have said delay the census until after COVID. Of course, at the time, we had no idea when COVID was going to end. But if we all remember that period, we were working from homes. I can imagine that logistical planning for the census in the Stats SA head office must have been very difficult. People were worried about enumerators. People were still dealing with the after effects of COVID. Our view is that it would have been far better to have delayed the census for a year or two and be certain that everything is correct and everything is in place, rather than trying to run it when they did, which seems to have been timed to comport with National Treasury directives to spend the budget money in that financial year.
And then according to you, what must happen now? Would you think that they have to redo it?
So some commentators have suggested the census should be redone. I don't think that that is a reasonable and realistic proposition. It takes 4 or 5 years to plan for a census. What I think we need to understand now is, firstly, to understand and collectively agree on what has gone wrong with the census, so that we can avoid these problems in the next census, which is coming up in 2031, for which planning must start in the next 2 or 3 years. And that's the first thing. And the second one is to really have a collective engagement between people like ourselves and Stats SA and a variety of other parties who've raised concerns about the data, to work out what we think are the best estimates of the South African population and its characteristics, which will inform service delivery, projects, infrastructure, planning for the next few years.
Professor, thank you very much for your insights this evening. That's University of Cape Town Professor of Demography and Director for the Centre for Actuarial Research, Tom Moultrie, speaking to us.